Services Marketing, MKT 625. Lecture number 30.
Assalamu alaikum Khawateen Hazrat. This is Wasim Ahsan, your instructor for the course Services Marketing MKT 625 at the Virtual University of Pakistan. I welcome you to lecture number 30. In the previous lecture, we learned how to establish an operational position. We looked at the fundamentals that lead us toward developing that position, and once we have developed that position, we know the kind of advantages that we can derive out of that position. As a matter of fact, we have to identify one position out of the three options available to us in order to be able to identify the rightmost location for the service delivery and the layout of that particular delivery of the service, and then come up with the job design. These are some of the objectives and benefits which we derive out of establishing our operational position. Now, the question is, how do we do that? When it comes to the job design, which happens to be one of the most important elements of the overall service design and service delivery, there is one element which really becomes very important, and that is the element of people. I did hint toward this toward the end of the previous lecture and took the talk briefly, that people are extremely important and they appear on the stage of the service delivery as on-stage people and the backstage people. On-stage people are the ones who are the contact employees, and backstage people are the ones who offer the front-end people all the support they require in order to deliver the service. So people, whether those are on-stage people or backstage people, have really got to be excellent. They've got to be excellent at the core job, and when it comes to the front-end people, they have to have an extra quality, and that is the quality of dealing with different kinds of people. They have to have a high level of people skills so that they really can influence their customers. What happens is that a service is produced by the support staff, no question about it, but then it is the front-end people who deliver that service with the help of the processes which are implemented by the support staff. So not only support staff has to be excellent at their core jobs, the front-end people in particular have to be extremely good at influencing their customers, because they are the ones who create the impression for the organization. They are the interface between the organization and the outer environment. Any customers walking into the facility develop an impression with the help of the servicescape they have walked in and the people they interact with. And also, these people, meaning the front-end people, along with the support people, have to exhibit another quality, and that is the quality of functional integration. Because of the characteristic of the variability in services, we've got to see to it that all the people working for the organization, whether on stage or backstage, are integrated into the process so beautifully that there are no conflicts between operations and marketing and sales, and therefore the people should end up working as the marketing people as well as operations people, and vice versa. This is attained with the help of cross-training, and internal marketing is the factor which comes into play at this particular stage. More on this in a few moments. If people are that important, then there has got to be every effort on part of the organization to retain good people. Organizations must look at their good people as human capital and not just as part of the process which goes on and on, whatever the situation is or circumstances are. That is a negative kind of a thinking. The positive thinking is that good people have got to be retained. This is a great challenge for the organizations nowadays. When people leave, organizations could have to incur very high costs. So in other words, turnover is very expensive for the companies, for the fact that they have to go for new people maybe at a higher cost, and second, it disrupts continuity and therefore productivity. People who are part of the organization which is functioning smoothly, when they leave, all of a sudden there's a vacuum, and filling that vacuum is not easy because it takes time before you really can bring replacements into the mainstream of the processes. And therefore, the disruption of productivity and low efficiency, and in turn, higher costs. This is a great challenge which companies could have to meet, and therefore, there should be every effort on their part to retain good people. Services, therefore, is obvious, are labor intensive, which require a lot of people. And if we have established the right operational position, we are in a position to go for those people who are just appropriate for the jobs that we have created. When we say right man for the right job, it all starts with the job design. If we have the right job design, we shall go for the right people. And we shall have the right job design if we have chosen the right operational position. So look at the correlations between all the elements, and then you realize the significance of all the factors that we are learning. Here, the importance of internal marketing really makes itself very obvious, because we have to choose the right people, and choosing the right people may not mean that we have people who are ready-made for the job. No, we may have to train them according to our requirements. What are the requirements? Well, we again have to go back to the operational position and see the level of complexity and divergence involved in our service. I would like to recall the 4 quadrants of the matrix that we have understood in light of the operational position. So depending upon the level of complexity and divergence, you train your people accordingly. And that is what is meant by requirements. Once again, to summarize, if we have chosen the right operational position, and before that we also had done the right exercise of blueprinting, and we have put all those parts of the processes into a proper perspective, then the chances are that we will come up with the right design and the right people who will fill that up, meaning that blueprint which I referred to. And that is how you come up with the different levels of jobs and tasks to be performed within an organization. The question here is, if people are that important, what is their role toward the job design? It is very interesting that we once again go back to the blueprinting, because it is on the blueprint that we have defined all the tasks divided into different jobs, and that is where the exercise of the job design really starts. And don't forget that job design is the first design toward the organizational design, and I will explain to you the why and how. Because once you have all the jobs portrayed on the blueprint, you have all the tasks divided into different jobs to be performed by the total organization. If the organization happens to be just one product organization, if the organization is dealing with so many different service products, you have so many different blueprints, and you connect all those blueprints in order to see the totality of services provided by the organization. Coming back to the job design, which is the starting point of the organizational design, let me define what exactly a job design is. It is a process through which managers decide how to divide different tasks into small jobs. So in other words, task is something bigger than a job. And when a task is divided into different parts, you say it has been divided into different jobs. There should be no confusion about that. You also might call jobs steps. But since job is an established terminology of business management, we should be talking about job design. Not to make any mistake that the jobs are the parts which form the one particular task, and I'm going to show you this with the help of a presentation which is going to make things very easy for all of us in terms of our clarity. So what happens is once you have the one job design portrayed on the blueprint, you can really develop other blueprints for other jobs or other activities or other tasks to be performed within the organization. If you put all of those together, you can come up with something which is cumulative in nature, meaning you have the total processes to be performed by the organization. And what you can do is you can define the different tasks into different components, meaning the on-stage component, the backstage component, the processes, and if you go up, the interaction that takes place between the front-end employees and the customers, and then relationships between employees, the interactions that take place between and among employees in order to implement the processes. So there is nothing which is not present on the blueprint if you try to be comprehensive in terms of your consideration. And like I said, once you put all those things together, you really can come up with a total job description for the organization. And that is the job description which already has been divided into different job descriptions in terms of different people who perform the process. If you have one person whose job is to just pack the food, then you have a job description for the packer, and so on and so forth. Whether it is a job on the support side or a job relating to the on-stage delivery of the service, it has to be portrayed as part of the blueprint, and that is a job which basically is a part of the task. And in order to come up with the right design, what managers do is they put different jobs together and then see what are those parts which should be performed by one individual or a bunch of individuals. And this is how we look into different jobs and then tasks and then job descriptions, and job descriptions of everyone, starting with the front-end employees right down to those who are not visible at all and they are part of the processes. Let me now show you the graphical presentation of how a task could be divided into different jobs for the purpose of clarity. As you can see here, we have two different tasks, task A and task B. Task A is divided into 4 different jobs, and that is why those are signified by J1A, meaning job 1 of task A. Then we have J2A and right up to J4A. So in other words, we have 4 different jobs which have been put together in order to perform task A. Now the question is, what are the jobs to be performed as one step, and what are the jobs which are to be performed as another step, but those are lumped together? If you go below the dotted line, which I will tell you why in the first place we have this dotted line, then you will see that we have the job design. The first job is the one which signifies receipt of cash. Just suppose for a while that this is a fast food chain and there is somebody responsible to take the order, get the cash, and then pass on the order to somebody else as other jobs. So the first job is completed then and there. As part of the job design, the next step which takes place is the preparation of food, and 3 steps of job 2A, 3A, and 4A have been formed together for the purpose of execution of this particular part of the task. In other words, 3 different jobs have been put together. Now, whether we have one person or we have more than one is something to be decided by the managers in light of the load of work. There is every possibility that the volume of service is very high and the number of orders that the cashier is taking is high, and therefore you may need more than one person in order to perform the next step or the next steps, which are 3 basically in nature, in order to complete the job. And then we have task B. The reason it is task B is because it is a little different in nature from the one which just preceded it as task A. Task B also has been divided into 2 parts or 2 jobs, which are job 1 and job 2. And job 1, if you take a close look, is packing. Maybe we have just one individual or more than one individual. Again, that is something which you have to decide, and I will get back to that point once I'm done with the explanation of these two jobs. This job is of packing. Whatever is being prepared at the stage of job 2, 3, and 4 of task A gets into the packing area, and the person responsible for packing completes his job. Once that is done, the food is handed over as job 2 of task B, and this is where the task gets completed. Well, let me say that this is kind of a simplified expression, a graphical expression of a sequence of tasks and jobs for the purpose of developing a clarity. When you get down to designing a job, you have to be even more detailed, and like I told you while I was talking about blueprinting process, you've got to think of each and every behavior and action. Every behavior and action, however qualitative that may sound and however abstract that may appear, we have to translate that into a concrete action in order to translate that into a particular job as part of a particular task. Now, the reason that I have shown that dotted line is because these small boxes which appear as jobs or small jobs starting with J1 and ending at J2 are the ones which must show themselves on the blueprinting. Because these are the ones which are formed into different tasks, these must go into the blueprint, and these will go onto the blueprint as part of the interaction, as part of the on-stage component, as part of the support component, processes, and so on and so forth. And once you have placed every job where it really belongs on the blueprint, you start developing the relationships. You will recall the horizontal lines and the vertical lines. When you draw those vertical lines, you are showing interaction. Interaction between company staff and customer, and interaction between company staff. And those are the points where relationships are developed. This is why I have shown this dotted line. And the definition of the process of job design is also given underneath, which says, through the process of job design, managers decide how to divide tasks into specific jobs. And I'm confident with the help of this presentation, our understanding of what a job is and what essentially a job design is, which could be extremely simple and which could be a little complicated depending upon the nature of service, our understanding of this concept should be now very clear. Now, in addition to our understanding of the sequence of the job design, there are a few more things that we have to learn as well. These are the kind of things which I was referring to when I was talking about the job design part of the operational position. Meaning the job design requirements in relation to the operating position of the company. And these are the job simplification, division of labor, job enlargement, and the job enrichment. As you can see from the slide, we have job simplification, which we generally refer to when we take the position of the cost efficiency, and that is why you see that expression underneath of high industrialized processes, meaning that when we have highly industrialized processes, we go for job simplification, because that's where the answer lies, and that is what really enables us to achieve efficiency and high productivity. And that is where we go for the division of labor. I will be talking about this particular concept of division of labor in a moment from now. The second option that we may have to ourselves is that of the job enlargement. And we go for job enlargement when we need to have some level of specialization and the cross training. The third option is that of the job enrichment, and this really refers to the highly specialized the kind of the operational position, and therefore has to be correlated with the position of customization. These are the three options that we deal with when we are designing the job. So in other words, it is the sequence of the job design which also takes into its account the options that we have available to us. Depending upon the nature of the service, we go for either simplification or enlargement or enrichment. Simplification and enlargement also can go together. When we try to simplify a job, we might feel the need of enlarging that particular job. How we enlarge a job is going to be discussed in a moment from now. Let me give you an introduction to the concept of division of labor, which you are very well familiar with from the course on the basic economics. It essentially is the grouping of similar jobs into related tasks. And the objective behind doing all this is to achieve high efficiencies and productivity. That is achieved through designing different jobs which are very well coordinated, and the sequence in relation to performance of which is absolutely seamless. There are no disruptions. Let me try to explain this with the help of an example as followed practically by one of the largest fast food chains in the world. Since that chain is existent in our market also, it is very appropriate to talk about the division of labor concept as exercised by this particular chain. They have divided the whole process into two different divisions. The one is the cooking division, whereas the other is the service division. The cooking division is headed by a chef, and everything that takes place in terms of cooking, or frying, or grilling, or handling all those things which are frozen and which still have to be cooked or grilled and so on and so forth take place within that division. And naturally they have a very well laid out sequence which is second to none in terms of quality and in terms of high efficiency. Anything that goes on within that division is part of that division. And when I make this statement, what I really mean is that all the jobs that have been defined as part of different processes have been formed into different tasks. And there is not just one task that takes place. There are so many different tasks. For example, pulling the frozen French fries out of the freezer and putting them into a deep fryer is quite a task. And there are so many different small jobs which form that particular task. So by the same token, there could be so many different tasks toward preparation of the burgers or the sandwiches before the food is delivered with the help of the front-end employees in the restaurant, or for that matter, through the drive-through window or through the direct delivery service. The fact remains that the one division is responsible for a collection of different tasks which are very closely related, and by relating those tasks into the one division, the company is in a position to achieve the highest level of efficiency, meaning they really can optimize their efficiency and productivity, and they can lower their costs, because that is the topmost objective of cost efficiency position. The other division is all about servicing, meaning when the food is ready and has been forwarded to the point where it is to be delivered to the customer, who will take it to his table if he happens to be within the restaurant. That is another division. And all the tasks which are being performed there and are closely related have been lumped together as another division, because that is how the company has drawn a distinction between the contact employees and the support employees. So in other words, the contact employees who form the on-stage component of the operation are in one division of servicing, whereas all other are part of the processes and they happen to be the part of the backstage component. This is a classical example of division of labor as exercised by one of the fast food chains. The essence here is, if we have defined our tasks and jobs sequentially, and those have been also defined in terms of the relationships those have either within the organization or with the customers, then the job design is going to be very relevant. Not only relevant, it will also reflect appropriate division of labor, which basically means that we have jobs that are simplified. Not overly simplified jobs, but simplified to the point where they offer us a high level of efficiency and lower costs. And that is one of the greatest objectives of the cost efficiency position. So therefore, whenever we employ the concept of division of labor, we employ that from the standpoint of simplifying jobs. And jobs that are simplified are the ones which can be highly standardized. Those are the ones which are very repetitive in nature, and those are the ones which are highly industrialized. And you know what is meant by that industrialization in the context of services. All those things are all those points and steps and jobs which are to be done repetitively in a highly standardized manner, so that the input and the output are just about the same every time those jobs are performed, is the process of industrialization. And through this process, companies achieve efficiencies. Now, the next option that we have to ourselves is that of job enlargement. Job enlargement may take place when you have the position of operational efficiency, and also when you have the position of customization. And this is the kind of customization which is basically an extension of either cost efficiency or service quality, and does not really reflect varied nature of service products like consultancies, meaning not the one which reflects those products which are very high on credence. You will know what I'm talking about, because those are the products the evaluation of which cannot be done even after those have been bought. So let us confine ourselves to those products which fall within the positions of either cost efficiency or service quality. And the reason I have added service quality also into the fold of cost efficiency, because you need to attain a high level of efficiency and productivity even when you are emphasizing the position of quality. And quality stressed a little rightwards towards customization is the position I'm taking at the moment and talking about. And you will recall that I basically am talking about the dimensions of quality. And any product that falls very well on merit of those dimensions is a quality product. And therefore, the job enlargement in this particular context is related to the cost efficiency and service quality positions. This basically is addition of a few more jobs into the existing job being performed by one person. In other words, it is addition of responsibility. And I would like to show this to you with the help of a graphical presentation as to how you can enlarge the job. But the essence remains of a larger responsibility in order to keep your people more busy and motivated. Why is it that you have to keep your people more busy? It basically stems from the motivational reasons, and before that, from the need to have a balance between the output of the preceding step and the input of the following step. You will recall the benefits of blueprinting, and I would like to take your attention toward that particular point when I said that output of this particular point has got to equate with the input of this particular point. Meaning, if these 2 points are 2 different jobs, the output and input must equate. Otherwise, one of the persons is going to be more busy and other less busy. So in order to see to it that a complete balancing of the load of work is done, we get into job enlargement. And when we get into job enlargement, we also motivate people because they think they have a bigger responsibility to exercise, and they feel more important, they feel more involved. The third option that managers could have to themselves is that of job enrichment. The job enrichment is very qualitative in nature as against job enlargement, whereas job enlargement is addition of more steps and more jobs. Job enrichment basically is an increase in the scope of responsibility, and that increase is very qualitative in nature. And let me explain that to you, how that can take place. Well, companies have different ways of enriching various jobs, and this job enrichment basically is correlated with the position of customization, because the scope which is being enriched generally relates to those kinds of jobs which are very highly specialized in nature. And this is where we get into the areas of consultancies. May that be the medical or legal, engineering, the management, the marketing research. You are dealing with the very highly qualified specialists who need to have some independence and autonomy, and therefore need to have some kind of flexibility to respond to different situations. And that is why the companies could have to exercise this kind of option when it comes to dealing with those kinds of jobs. How can they enrich jobs? Well, there are 4 different ways. One is that companies empower their workers to experiment new ways of finding solutions. The other is they allow their people to be more flexible in responding to different emerging situations by exercising their judgment. The third way is by developing certain special skills of your staff, which is done by conducting certain training programs, and that forms part of the internal marketing process. The fourth way is allowing your workers to monitor and measure their own performance against certain pre-established standards. Although this is done against standards, but then it does entail a certain level of flexibility and liberty. And when people feel their jobs have been enriched by the factors that I've talked about, they feel more involved into the process and do their best to deliver services to the betterment of the organization as well as the customers. Because when their involvement is high, their interest is very high. And when they take a lot of interest into the delivery of the job, their output is at their best. We can draw a very interesting lesson from this. Job enlargement and enrichment are more conducive to flexible organizational structures, whereas the job simplification and division of labor has a higher applicability in those structures which are kind of highly centralized. So centralization correlated with simplification and division of labor, so that the repetitive tasks are performed in a highly industrialized manner, and flexibility and liberty related with decentralized and flexible structures where independent decisions and some independent roles toward delivery of the service are to be played by highly placed employees. Job simplification and division of labor versus enlargement and enrichment can be explained in yet another way, and that is, if we were to put these 3 techniques on one linear spectrum, with job simplification at the left end and job enrichment at the right end of the spectrum, we should have job enlargement sitting right in the middle. And the reason we should show that right in the middle, because job enlargement works both ways. When you are simplifying your processes, you may feel the need of enlarging jobs as well. Because when you are enlarging a job, you are not really compromising the simplification of the process. You are only adding a few more jobs to the overall task, because you think the possibility is there in terms of time which it takes to perform that particular job or the overall task. You are not making your people overly burdened. You're only trying to draw a balance between inputs and outputs. That is something that you have to keep in mind. And through that, what you are basically achieving is efficiency and high productivity. If enlargement does not really lead towards efficiency, then that enlargement is no good, because it brings in complexity and compromises the simplification process. And that is why I say that job enlargement can sit at the middle point of that spectrum, working both ways. It also works toward the job enrichment side, because when you are enriching a job, you might also feel the need of enlarging the job as well, because there are certain steps that you might feel that should be performed by the same person. Let us take a look at these two concepts or techniques with the help of two different slides. As you can see from this slide, which basically is a continuation of the one that we saw earlier in relation to different options, meaning job design options. Here it is extended into the enlarged job area. So if you take a closer look below the dotted line, you have the original job design which I showed you earlier. The job of the cashier and the job of those who are preparing the food. If you take a look underneath the brown solid bar, which reflects the enlarged job, it says cash and preparation. So what you have done here is you have enlarged the job by putting the cash part of the job into the preparation, because you think it is more practical for people who are preparing the sandwiches to also take the order and the payment as well. And if you think that is more efficient, the job must be enlarged. By the same token, if you take a look at task B, the jobs of packing and delivering also have been enlarged into one. Those two have been integrated and reflect one job as packing and handing over. This, I would say, is a very simple example of job enlargement, and the basic idea is to prepare you for this kind of thinking, where you really can go for enlarging the job by keeping a few fundamental things in view, that it must not compromise the process of job simplification, and it must not create any kinds of operational bottlenecks. Now, let me take you to the next slide, which is about job enrichment. As you can see, the core of the circle reflects the original job which people are supposed to be doing, or an individual is supposed to be doing. His job has been enriched, which is depicted by the outer circle, and you can see 4 different kinds of inputs having gone into the enriched area, and those are the ones which I talked about in terms of empowerment, flexibility, development, and monitoring. Only because of the fact that the company has empowered its people to experiment new things in order to deliver the service in a better way, and it has given its people the flexibility of responding to situations by using their own judgment instead of asking somebody else. And it also is developing certain special skills by conducting some training programs, and it also is allowing its people to monitor and measure their performance against certain pre-established standards. The company is enriching that particular job, and it is because of these inputs that the people feel a very high level of interest and involvement into the delivery process. This should take us to the next slide, which again is a continuation of the job design options that you already have seen, and you can see from here the relevance of the industrialized process and division of labor in relation to job simplification, and specialization and cross-training in relation to job enlargement, and high specialization in relation to job enrichment. And this is what I was talking about when I originally showed you this particular slide. With the understanding of the 3 techniques of job simplification, enlargement, and enrichment, I would now like to take you to another model propounded by 2 experts. This model basically deals with the motivational characteristics of different kinds of jobs. Coming to services, what is its application? That is what we have to see. Well, if we think that in services, it is very important for managers to come up with a job design that maximizes output, lowers costs, and optimizes the working relationships, then it becomes very important for us to have a very clear understanding of the motivational characteristics as given by these two experts. These experts maintain that there are 5 different areas of a job which are to be considered while you are coming up with that job, meaning while you are defining the contents of that job. How do you define the contents of that job? I think you know by now very well that you have to go back to the blueprint. Blueprint basically is the mother of all these concepts and techniques, because it is with the help of the blueprint you understand the sequence of the jobs put into different tasks performed by one individual or more than one individual along with relationships. Now, if you have the right sequence and if you have the right contents of the task, then you have the right job design in front of you. And if you have the right job design, you have to view it from these 5 different viewpoints, which are the characteristics of this model. And those are, number 1, skill variety. Number 2 is task identity. Number 3 is task significance. Number 4 is autonomy. And number 5 is feedback. What are these characteristics? We've got to understand all those because it is quite very important for us to know how they really can help us to come up with the rightmost content of one particular job. Let us talk about these one by one. First of all, skill variety. It basically is the degree to which people within an organization have been prepared to handle different kinds of jobs. And this is something which really highlights the area of inseparability, meaning the characteristic of services. If marketing people are in a position to take care of the operations jobs as well, and vice versa, that really highlights their ability to surmount the challenge of variability. The different skills which are required by the staff members of any organization essentially relate to the front-end employees, because they are the ones who deal with the customers and form that contact with the outer environment, and therefore they have to have very good listening and communication skills. And this is one of those characteristics which I did talk about in detail during my previous lecture in some other context. However, listening and communication skills are very important for front-end people, because they are the ones who have to influence customers, they are the ones who deliver the service, and they are the ones who also, in most of the cases, register complaints. And any weakness on the listening side or communication side can distort the nature of the complaint, thereby reducing the company's ability to deal with the complaint accordingly. Another skill that providers should possess is that of empathy. Empathy is pretty well known to all of us as one of the dimensions of quality, and being empathetic amounts to satisfying the customers. Why? Because customers think providers are on the same page, and they think about us, they care about us, and that is how customers get satisfied. Yet another skill that providers should have is their ability to be able to deal and manage different kinds and different personalities of their customers. Customers could be of different kind, could be soft-spoken, rude, arguing type. Whatever the type they are, the front-end component of the staff should have the capability of dealing with all of them. Now the question is, what do we do in terms of the support staff when it comes to developing skill variety? The answer is there is not really much that we can do about it, because they are part of the process which is highly industrialized, and it is taking place in a repetitive fashion, and the outcome is very highly predictable because we know what they are working at. And therefore all that we can do in order to develop their skills is to start rotating their positions. and we rotate their positions with the help of cross-training. So cross-training is the answer to this repetitiveness and this industrialization. If you can spot those workers who exhibit qualities in areas other than they are the part of, you should put those the people into a training program so that they can be rotated for motivational reasons. Just think of a person who's part of the production process in the fast food chain, taken out of there and put onto the sales side, exhibiting good skills of communication as well, is going to end up as a highly motivated individual. And he also can be an example for others to follow. Another thing that you might do as part of the skill variety in relation to the support staff is job enlargement, because when you enlarge a particular job, you are adding certain more steps into the existing responsibilities. And with the addition of those steps, the person is more responsible, he's more involved, he's more interested, and therefore he is more motivated. So these are the kind of the simple techniques that the providers have to themselves in order to keep their support staff motivated in terms of skill varieties. What is the next characteristic is all about task identity. The task which one individual is performing has got to be identifiable. This is the definition of task identity, meaning anything a worker is doing, it has got to be measured in terms of an independent work unit. If the work performed by a worker cannot be identified as an independent unit, that job really is low on identity. And that is where the providers have got to be very careful that a balance could be maintained between jobs that are low on identity and those that are high on identity. These are the inherent features of different jobs. There is not much which people can do about it, but if you go for the job design in a smart way, there are so many different things which you can incorporate into the whole design. For example, the job of a telephone operator, which is quite very low on identity, because all he or she is doing is conveying information from customers to the personnel who are part of the support process, and nothing more than that. You start thinking, or rather you should start thinking in terms of enlarging that job if you really can. Why? Because the next time when the customer calls with complaint, the customer can be very rude to the receptionist who will respond by saying, well, he doesn't know what's going on. And that is a very embarrassing situation. In order to keep people from this kind of a situation where they respond in a negative fashion, it becomes the responsibility of the providers to come up with a design which consists of jobs that are not extremely low on identity. Another example of a job which could be low on identity is that of somebody sitting in a call center getting just orders. There is nothing more than that what he is doing. So this job also happens to be quite very low on identity. However, conversely, a job which is very similar in nature but is higher on identity is that of an online banker. An online banker is in a position to share in a better way some substantial information with the customers, because he talks about the account statement, any errors in the billing or interest accrued, and he can answer so many questions that customer might ask. So this job is pretty high on identity. Having talked about two characteristics of the particular model, we're left with the remaining three, which I shall be talking about in the next lecture. And before I do that, let me give you the summary of what I've talked about during this lecture. I started with the importance of people when it comes to designing a job. The people happen to be one of the most vital elements of services marketing, because services are very labor intensive. We deal with people all the time, and it is the people who deliver the service, and it is the people who exercise and implement all the processes in order to come up with a certain outcome of a service delivery. Therefore, the people have got to be taken very seriously in terms of choosing people, in terms of training people, and in terms of looking into the job design from the perspective of people's ability to deliver services and to execute their responsibilities. I also went back to the blueprinting because the blueprinting happens to be the mother of all the concepts and techniques that I've talked about during the lecture. The thrust of the lecture has been toward the role and importance of people as part of the job design, and in that relation I've talked about all the techniques of job simplification, job enlargement, and job enrichment. I was talking about the motivational characteristics of the different kinds of jobs when time ran out, and we'll pick up the threads in the next lecture where I just ended. Thank you very much for the attendance, and Allah Hafiz until then.